Hey everyone, my name is JD and this is my channel Frost and Forest. Today I'm going to be doing a declutter video. Basically I have 3 decks that I am pretty sure that I'm ready to move on to somebody else. I kind of wanted to show you all my process for how I decide if I'm going to move a deck along or not. Part of the reason why this is happening now is last year I got quite a few new decks, and this year I'm trying to slow it down a little bit, but I do know that there are some decks that are going to be coming out this year that I'm going to want. And so I'm trying really hard to be intentional about the decks I get and the decks I keep, just because, you know, I only have so much space for decks and I don't really want to take over my whole house with shelving for decks. So I like the amount of space that I have for decks, and I would kind of like to stay within that space. And so because of that, I am, thinking about these decks to see if, one, am I going to use them, or am I always going to choose a different deck first? And 2, do I think that I'm truly going to miss them and want to use a specific deck or use that specific deck moving forward? So one of the first things, and the first deck that I am thinking about rehoming is the Wild Reflections Tarot. And so one of the first things that I like to do one of the first things I like to do when I'm thinking about if I'm going to rehome a deck or not is I put the deck back in order. And I do that for 2 reasons. One, because it gives me an opportunity to really look at the art and really look at the deck and touch the deck and hold the deck, and just interact with the deck. And 2, I feel like if I'm giving this deck to someone else or selling this deck to somebody else, I like to have the deck back in order for them, because I think it's a more enjoyable experience for them to be able to open the deck and it feels more like brand new. So I have put this deck back in order. And so I spent some time looking at the art, and this is a very beautiful deck. I love the colors. I love the outdoor feel to it. It feels like an outdoorsy deck, which is something that I love. And it's just, in general, a beautiful deck. It's also a pretty reasonably priced deck. And so in general, there's nothing wrong with this deck. And I think that that's really important to say, is any of these decks that I'm thinking about passing along to somebody else, it's not because there's anything wrong with these decks. All of them are beautiful. I know, the creators worked really hard in creating them. I just, at the end of the day, I want it to go to someone who will use it, instead of me, who's not really using it. So after looking at this deck, I still feel like this deck could maybe be moved along. And part of that is because I have a couple other decks that feel very similar that I know for sure I want to keep. So I'm going to grab those. So the first one is the Lightseers Tarot. And I know I'm definitely not the first person to be able to see that these decks look similar, because they do. And I'm sure there's someone out there who's done a comparison video that shows how similar they are. They're both very beautiful decks, but at the end of the day, the Lightseer is a special deck to me. It was one of the first decks that I got when I sort of got back into tarot. And so I am not likely to get rid of the Lightseers. And so because of that, that is one reason why I think I'm going to move this deck along. The other deck that I have that feels very similar to me is the Cosmic Wisdom Tarot. This is a newer deck to my collection, but I think that this one also feels very similar. They're both kind of like modern takes on decks. They both use sort of similar nature-y feels, and they both kind of, to some extent, have a lot of purples in them as well. So these also feel very similar, and I really like the Cosmic Wisdom Tarot. I'm also still kind of getting to know it and still figuring out how I want to use it, and so I'm also planning on keeping this one. So because of that, I think that the Wild Reflections Tarot deck can go. The one thing I am sad about is I do love in this deck that the Pentacles are sunflowers. I think that that was ultimately why I bought this deck to begin with. But I don't think that that's enough of a reason to keep it when I have other decks I will use instead. So the next deck that I'm thinking about rehoming is called the Chubby Squirrel Lenormand. And this is not my usual style for a deck, but I got it because someone was selling it with the bundle with a different deck that I wanted, and I think she just wanted to move it on, so she's like, please just take it. So I took it, and I used it. You know, I last year had a period of time where I was having a hard time and I wasn't using tarot very much. And I used this and a few of my other really cute, lighthearted decks to help me try to get back into tarot. But part of because it's cute and it's adorable. And it's a Lenormand deck, so it's pretty straightforward. So I really appreciated it at the time when I had it. But another deck came in last year that I really like. And I'm going to find the garden so we can compare those. Another deck I got last year, is the Happy Ghost Lenormand. It's by the same creator that did the Boo Tarot. And I am pretty confident that if I am looking for a cute, Lenormand deck, I am probably going to go for the Little Ghost Lenormand. And so while this one was great and I appreciate that I had it when I did, I love the Little Ghost Lenormand a lot. And so I think that I would like the Chubby Squirrel to go to someone who actually wants to use it. So yeah, I think this is another deck that I'm going to be moving along. They're both beautiful. They both are cute. They have a very similar vibe to me. But I don't think I would use both of them, because if I'm looking for something cute and cuddly as a Lenormand deck, I'm going to go for my Little Ghosts. So the last deck, this is the one that I'm the least sure about moving on, is the Steampunk Fairy Tarot. So don't get me wrong, this deck is very pretty. It's very cute. I just haven't really been inclined to use it since I got it, and I got it right when it came out, because this was a deck that I was watching the artist release art on it. And I was really excited about it, so I pre-ordered it and I got it right away. And then I just haven't been using it. And I think it's because I have a lot of other decks that kind of fit this space a little bit for different reasons. And so this isn't likely to be the first deck that I pick. Some positives about it: the art is beautiful, it's very well done. There is a lot of diversity in this deck. We don't see very many fairy decks that have more diverse fairies in them, and not just white fairies. And so I think that that's really cool. So I think this deck has a lot of positives, and you know, if you love this deck, that is awesome, and I'm so happy for you, and you should keep loving this deck. Another thing that I had a little hard time with this deck is that the minors kind of focus on these creatures instead of on the fairies. When I got this deck, I didn't really know that that was how it was going to go. So I think that that makes this feel, to me, less like a fairy deck and more like a specific world deck, if that makes any sense at all. It feels like its own world instead of a fairy deck. Because I have some fairy decks. I have the Victorian Fairy Tarot. I did a video about it. So this just feels like a fantasy world deck to me a little bit. I think the other reason that I was maybe not jiving with it as much is, for me, steampunk is something that is usually dark and a little bit gothic. And so this is not darker, a little bit gothic. And so that's why, you know, I think, and I'll show some of the other decks that I have. That's why I think if I am looking for something steampunk, you know, I'm looking for something a little bit darker like this, something a little bit more like, yeah, both the Nine of Cups. So you can see I'm looking for something a little darker, and more like the Steampunk Tarot, as you can see here. And so, you know, I also think this year I've started getting into darker decks, and as you can maybe tell from this video, I'm not as attracted to lighter decks. And so, yeah, I think if I'm looking for steampunk, I'm going to be looking for something like this. Or there's another deck that I've really started to love, and this is, what is it called? This is called the Stardust Wanderer Tarot. And so I know, you know, bear with me, these decks do not look necessarily anything like each other, but they kind of feel the same way to me. They both have these like purpley colors and kind of blue colors, because this is like kind of cosmic pirates. It has sort of that steampunk feel to me. And so I've been using this deck a lot, and I'm not sure that there would be a time that I would choose this deck over this deck. So you can kind of see. And again, this deck is a little bit, the pirate deck is a little bit darker as well. And so I think I like that. Oh, I love that Hermit card. So yeah. And then the last deck that I think kind of fits into this conversation is, you know, I said that part of what I like about this, or part of what I, how I feel about this deck is that it feels like sort of a fantasy world deck. You know, if I'm looking for a fantasy world, I am going to use the Magical Creatures deck. This is the deck that I really, really like. This one here. And so if I'm looking for a world of magical creatures, you know, if we kind of ignore the steampunk theme for a minute, but has something that has like dwarfs and fairies and mer people and things like that, I'm probably going to choose this one because I really like this one. And so for that reason, I think that that this just one, that the steampunk fairy is just not getting used. And so I have to decide if I want to keep it. This is the one that, you know, I'm struggling with the most. I'm still trying to decide if I want to get rid of it or move it along. I think I do. The other good thing about something like this is it is a mass market deck that is available right now. And so if I really feel like it was truly a mistake for me to get rid of this deck, and then I can buy it again. Now, that said, I don't really like to do that. I try not to do that. And so, you know, I try to be pretty sure before I do, but just for my own worst case scenario mind, you know, if I do decide that I am, you know, I'm missing the Steampunk Fairy deck, I can always get it again. Yeah, so thank you for processing this with me. I hope that this was helpful for you. You know, again, basically, you know, my general process is I put them back in order. I see how I feel about them. And then I kind of think about what are other decks that sort of fill the same slot for me. Yeah, so I think it's likely that I will move on the Steampunk Fairy Tarot, as well as the Wild Reflections Tarot, and then the Chubby Squirrel Lenormand. Yeah, so thanks for stopping by.